going. Hello, it's Mike. Welcome back to Humble Running. I hope you've been enjoying some of my Wilson Creek frozen 20-mile race content, whether that be helping me choose my shoes for the race, which I did go forward with in the Nordo 005s. Also my final gear check using the Instinct Evolution 7-liter pack. And of course, race recap, footage on the race. I hope you enjoyed seeing me really push out there. Really tough early season race. It's always interesting to get out there early in the season, see how hard you can push, see how you feel. Today, I want to specifically dig into my hDrop hydration sensor analysis data. So I want to go through the charts that I see, what exactly I get back from that device after the race, and what I'm gonna do with it. So I am trying to squeeze this run in before this storm rolls through. We're kind of at the front edge right now. Gonna get a good amount of snow for skiing up there next week or so. But yeah, I'm gonna get this one in, get home. I'll take a quick look at the hDrop data from this run, but then I'll really focus on the stuff from the race. All right, so I'm back home after my quick test run. I'm gonna go straight into my Wilson Creek 20-mile hDrop hydration sensor analysis. I've got the activity open in my hDrop app here. I've taken these numbers out, plugged them into a spreadsheet here on my laptop so I could easily do my analysis there. But everything you'll see right here on my laptop are numbers that I'm taking straight from the screen. I also screenshotted the charts that are in the app so we can look at them more closely on the screen here. But everything for all of your activities is all located here in the hDrop app. So coming down into my spreadsheet here, I started recording via the app at 7:20 a.m. and the race start was 7:30 a.m. By the time the race ended, I was 2:59 something, so it was pretty much 3 hours on the dot. So I'm going to use 3 hours for some of my numbers here. But by the time I got back to the car, I have to stop the activity for the hDrop recording in the app. So I started it in the car, left my phone in the car. The data was collecting via my Garmin watch. And then after the race, I have to go back to the car and I have to stop the hDrop app while I have internet connection, which I luckily did in the parking lot over there at the race. So it took me some time after the race to warm up, had a hot soup. I didn't immediately run to the car to go stop the app. I knew I would kind of do this post-analysis, so it wasn't critical to get it as close as possible to the finish time. So I went back, stopped it. In the hDrop app, I have a total of 228.6 minutes. So my race time was 3 hours, so that's 180 minutes total. And I put that down here in my actual race time for my spreadsheet calculations. So the stuff that I put here in blue is what I pulled directly from the hDrop app. So for that 228.6 minutes, I just converted quickly here, 3.8 hours. You'll see the numbers here, 92.7 ounces. That averages out to 24.3 ounce average sweat rate. And now again, that's, with a little bit of extra time, 10 minutes before the race and, a bunch of time after the race. You get total sodium loss, total potassium loss, and then you get your sodium concentration here. I'm in America here, so I think in ounces. You may have to convert this to liters, which is a little strange here because I have it set up to show my volume numbers in ounces. So on the main screen, I see the sodium concentration of 45.2 milligrams per ounce. There's a little button that goes to drink matching, and that uses a calculation based on milligrams per liter. And strangely, that's something that I'm accustomed to seeing in terms of sodium due to using precision hydration stuff. Their drink mix packages are named like 1,000 and 1,500, and that's 1,500 milligrams of sodium based on 32 ounces of fluid. So strangely, I think in ounces, but in terms of sodium, I do think in milligrams per liter. So this number does show up in yellow here, the 1,527, but you have to go into the drink matching page unless you have it set in your preferences as metric units. Then you will see this number on the main screen. I have it set to imperial, so I see 45.2. Don't worry if this is causing confusion. I hope it's not too much. In any case, 1,500 milligrams per liter is pretty much on the high side in terms of being a salty sweater. And this is something I know from experience. So 3-hour race, I see this kind of number. It's not shocking to me. You really want to match that electrolyte value in your races. So if I was thinking of some of the precision stuff that I would take, those 1,500 packets, it's 2 of those 1,500 packets, each one in 16 ounces. So over 32 ounces, I'm putting 2 of those packets, and I'm going to pretty much hit that number on the nose. So that's something I would think about in terms of wanting to meet my sodium electrolyte needs. Looking at my analysis here, I have all these numbers, but I definitely want to account for the fact that I started the readings from the sensor 10 minutes early, and then also I started it if it was 180 minutes of racing time. My number's 228.6, so that's I essentially have 48 extra minutes of readings that go into these averages. So if I'm looking at total fluid loss, in the app you can actually pinch zoom on all of the charts on the x-axis and the y-axis. I'm going to bring up the sweat rate chart here. There's also a total fluid loss chart, which I don't have here, and it's just basically a graph that goes up of your total fluid loss. So what I did is I pinch zoomed into that, and I got the reading at 10 minutes, which is here. I'm looking at the sweat rate chart. I got the reading at 10 minutes, and I got the reading at 180 minutes. Or, sorry, 190 minutes. Oh, I'm a little off here. My finish should be 190. Actually, this bar is a little off. That's okay. So at 10 minutes, see I did mark it down here. At 10 minutes, I zoomed in and I saw that, okay, it had me reading 10 ounces of loss after 10 minutes. And so I had warmed up, I had started running, I'd been moving around before the race. The sensor was already kind of kicked in at that point. I had done a quick jog away from the car, rushed up to the finish line. It had me at 10 ounces. It's kind of high, but it takes a little while for the sensor to settle in. You'll see in some of these charts if you used it. So then I zoomed in at 190, which is again 180 minutes of racing time plus the 10 extra minutes, and I saw 80 ounces of total fluid loss. Quick subtraction, 70 ounces of total fluid loss adjusted for my race duration. Divide that by the time, hours. I was pretty much 3 on the nose, so that was pretty easy. And I came out to 23.3 ounces. So a little lower than their average sweat rate that they gave. Depending on the duration that you're testing and stuff, that may vary a bit. But this is telling me I'm losing 23.3 ounces of sweat per hour over the course of this 3-hour effort. If I come down and look, these are the charts that they give you within the app. This is the elevation chart based on time that I pulled out of Garmin. So you can see there's a big, huge climb in the middle. And I kind of want to look at how does this match up with my sweating, the data that hDrop giving me. Is it correlate? Is it accurate? These are the kind of things I want to look at. Quickly, if I look at the elevation chart by distance, obviously it's going to get squished a little. If you're doing it by time, it takes you longer to get up the hill, so the hill in the chart is going to look a little longer. Up to the top of the Wilson Summit, which you saw in my recap video, it's a pretty steep climb. 7.34 miles from the start, and then 2 miles at the base of the climb. I took the elevation here. Of course, there's ups and down here. So I got 494 feet per mile, and that's just a quick average of the total elevation gain. Anyway, just giving you a sense of the course there. If you take a look at this right here, you could see in the sweat rate chart, it's kind of high in the beginning, and this is the portion where I started in the car until the start of the race. So it does take a little while for the sensor to kick in. This line should be a little to the right at 190 minutes, which does make sense based on this sweat rate. Looking at this, I hit the summit in about 112. So that's about 72 minutes. Again, the 10 minutes here. So it's around 82 minutes on this chart, and you could see my sweat rate is really peaking at the top of that climb. Okay, so it's set. It takes some time for the sensor to settle in, but then you could see it go up, and this is pretty much when I hit the top of the climb, and then a little bit beyond, obviously you're going to continue to sweat. Then I have a long descent in this portion right down here, and you could see how the sweat rate drops. Later on, I have another big climb, and then there's another shorter climb here, and you could kind of see these kind of like peaks, dips correlating to the descent, and then another rise in the sweat rate as I do this last climb. Again, I'm probably pushing a little bit more at the end of the race here, so it's not going to be so, regular. It can be a little bit irregular. If you're putting out harder effort, you're going to sweat more no matter if you're going downhill or not. But I generally was pushing harder, sweating more on the inclines, and that shows in this chart here. Another chart they show is the sweat zones chart. They have it listed as beta here, but they're essentially kind of giving you a gauge of this orange zone down here is showing that your sweat is concentrated, being high levels of sodium in it. If you're up here in this blue zone right here, that's showing that you're diluted. There's probably more water in your sweat, less sodium. Perhaps you need more electrolytes. From what they tell me, being around the number 50 in terms of their chart here is where you want to be. So the idea is you want to stay between being too concentrated with sodium and drinking too much water without enough electrolytes in and becoming too diluted. In this particular race, I took Maurten Bicarb at 6:15 a.m. The race start was 7:30. If you watch my recap video, you can see that didn't necessarily go so great for me. I looked up the sodium numbers. For my weight, I get 4,100 milligrams of sodium in the full dose. Now I've been cutting that in half, so that's still 2,050 milligrams of sodium in one shot. So that's a lot of sodium right off the bat. And if you look at my sweat zones chart here, you can see in the beginning of the race, it shows how concentrated my sweat is with sodium. Now, the more you sweat, the harder effort you put, the more salty your sweat is going to be. That's a default, bicarb or not. I think this is probably a combination of throwing bicarb in the mix plus very high effort, very high sweat. Again, I'm going up that big climb in this section here, so you can see the concentrated sodium levels. Again, around 92 minutes, I'm hitting the summit, and then the rest of the way, my sodium, obviously my sweat level does drop a bit. As you can see in the first chart, my sweat rate drops a bit because I'm going downhill. Got to the backside of the peak. It was cold, it was windy. My sweat rate definitely dropped. I wasn't feeling great, partly due to the bicarb effect. It just made me not feel good, so I couldn't put out as much effort because I wasn't feeling good. My fitness wasn't probably as good as it could have been to really push that hard. So I did slow down my effort. And then you could see how maybe some of that bicarb did get sweated out. The sodium in that bicarb did, get sweated out early in the race. And also a combination of me probably sweating less with the lower effort, the descent, the cold temperatures on the course. It does kind of level out around their 50 range, which is what they call ideal. So the last chart that they show here is sodium concentration. I'll zoom in on some of these charts actually here. So again, I think of sodium concentration in milligrams per liter due to the fact that a lot of the products are marketed in that way, including precision products. So I see a number of 45.3 milligrams per ounce on the main page, but then I see 1500 in the drink matching page. Now they give you this number based on the highest output number within your activity. So if you look at this chart right here, that's probably me on somewhere along the way up to the summit, where it's the highest sweat rate, the highest sodium concentration, and that's the number they give you. They don't average it out for that type of for the full effort. I'm not sure exactly what the reason is for that, why they don't average it out. I think they want to make sure that the electrolyte level is enough. They don't want to kind of undersell you in terms of electrolytes, because I believe, as long as you're not going crazy, you're just going to sweat it out if you have extra. If you have too little, maybe it could be a problem. But if you see in my chart, I think if you were going to go for a steady effort, you would want to look at see where it levels out. So I'm at kind of a 35 range, and this is what I've seen in some of my testing. I'll be up around 40, 35 to 40, and I have a little calculator here. So if I punch in the number 40, this is the direct number of milligrams in their chart. So if I punch in the 40, this is just straight a conversion from ounces to liters. So if I have 40 here, it's showing me that I have 1353 milligrams per liter, and that's the concentration of sodium you would need in your drink mix. And they have a whole drink chart with different types of products in there. If you're not as salty as me, say you were down here and you were at 20, then you'd be looking at 676. That may be more reasonable for non-salty sweaters. Looking at my numbers here, they're pretty high. If you were testing this and you're not a salty sweater, you're not a salty sweater, or you don't know, that's the whole point of this, you may see drastically different numbers than you're seeing on my charts here. So if you were seeing sodium numbers on the chart lower here, say 500 milligrams per liter, so that's basically plain water and possibly a 250 milliliter salt tab every 16 ounces. So these are the kind of things you could figure out with a sensor like this. So just clicking through, this is a zoomed in view of the sweat zones. Again, this is the climb portion. You could see bicarb is flowing through my system. I'm sweating heavily. I'm going uphill. And then here, it's colder, lower effort, going through the descent, not sweating as heavily. I could still have sodium in my system, but I'm possibly just not sweating as much. And here again is the sweat rate. I'm sweating heavily up the hill. This is the long descent after, and then there's a couple spikes for the big hills, and then there was a descent to the finish. So this yellow line should actually probably be around here at 190. I put that in the wrong spot. So I had a long descent down to the finish for the last 3 miles or so. So this does correlate. When I'm looking at these charts here, the numbers that I'm getting, really do make sense to me. So if I'm coming back to the ounces, what did I drink during the race? I calculated, if you watched my recap video, that I did drink 16.7 ounces per hour. They recommend 50 to 70% of your total fluid loss. I don't know how they necessarily arrive at those numbers, but you definitely don't want to be going 100% replacement, because then that's too much fluid. You are going to like lose some fluid by other means and not just sweat. It's not a direct correlation of what this is reading to what you need to take in. Obviously, they're crunching massive amounts of data, so that is their recommendation. So if I punch that in, I'm coming in at 12 to 17 ounces of fluid based on my numbers from that race. And I did drink 16.7 ounces. So I was in a pretty good range for that. I felt like I could have drank more. It was very cold, extremely dry, and again, I did have the high sodium from the bicarb, so it certainly felt like I was concentrated, and that showed up in the charts early in the race. I did feel like I could have drank more, but this is showing me that I'm kind of in an okay range, and I have to say I did not get dehydrated during the race at all, despite feeling too bad. I hit 100 grams of carbs. I didn't have a fueling bunk. I felt like I more had a bunk in terms of my legs, like not being prepared for the climbing, the bicarb making me feel weird. So it was more of like, I would say, physical slow burn towards the end of that race, if you watch my video, versus an energy bonk. I guess that's good news for me that I was able to drink within the range that I'm supposed to be drinking according to the hDrop app, and hitting the 100 grams of carbs probably allowed me to really have a kind of a slow fade but not completely fall apart, because I did have a lot of energy on board. So I think that's about it as far as the analysis. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. I may have zipped through a lot of that really fast, but you can pause the video at any point if you want to look at these numbers. If you have any questions about how I went about doing this, by all means. This is completely new technology. I'm not aware of anybody that's gone out and run a race, had a tool to measure their sweat rate and really looked at it in this way. So this may be completely new to some of you seeing this kind of analysis for the first time. I've been doing it on my own for my training runs and stuff with the hDrop app, so I see things, I'm very familiar with it, but seeing some of these things, I might have glossed over some stuff that's apparent to me, but maybe not to those of you watching. So again, any questions, feel free to shoot them to me into the comments. If you have any other questions about maybe other scenarios as far as sweat rate testing, I'm open to trying anything. Again, I've got the treadmill over here. I do want to dig into the bicarb stuff a little bit more, because that's very interesting to me, and the way it seemingly affected some of the charts here and the data that I saw is quite interesting. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the content from the race. I will talk about in a separate video race analysis outside of just the hDrop hydration aspect. I'll talk about how I felt I did on the race, stuff that I talked about in the beginning there. I'll cover that in a separate video. So if you're interested in that and not so interested in these numbers, keep an eye out for that. But this is very important. Hydration, fueling, extremely important. I would urge you all to take the time. You don't have to buy a product like this. My first video, I did the sweat rate test. I showed you could do this at home. You could do this, go for a run out the door, test your sweat rate when you get back. This device does have the advantages of looking at your sodium concentration and your potassium concentration. I'm not quite sure what to do with that exactly, but you may feel like you're a salty sweater, or you're not a salty sweater, or you may feel like you're a heavy sweater, or you're not a heavy sweater, but you may be wrong. You may be way off. This has the advantage of putting some numbers in front of you, and you could test it over and over and really determine for yourself if it seemingly matches up. So I'm a huge fan of this. I think it's awesome.